They came from the east like a rumor. At first no one believed they were real. Merchants spoke of cities erased overnight, of armies that vanished without leaving behind a battlefield, of riders who did not stop to sleep, who did not build camps, who did not retreat. Men laughed at these stories. Empires do not fall to shadows. And yet across the endless grasslands of Central Asia, entire kingdoms had already been swallowed. Khwarezm, Transoxiana, Persia. Names that had once commanded fear were now only ash on the wind. The people who destroyed them called themselves Mongols, but in the courts of Europe they were called something else. Demons. In the year 1223, the Western world still believed itself untouchable. From the forests of Rus to the plains of Hungary, knights trained for wars they understood. Wars with banners, horns, and clear lines. Wars where enemies faced each other, charged, and either won or died with honor. They did not know that war had changed. Far beyond their borders, a new kind of enemy had been born, one that did not fight for land or gold or even glory. They fought for annihilation, and they were coming. The first sign was blood on the horizon. The Cumans, nomadic warriors who had ruled the steppe for generations, suddenly appeared at the borders of the Slavic world. They did not arrive as conquerors. They arrived as refugees. Their horses were exhausted, their armor dented, their banners torn, and their faces filled with terror. They brought a single message. A force from the east had shattered them, not defeated, not pushed back, erased. Their armies had been cut to pieces, their cities burned, their people hunted down like animals, and the Cumans, once feared across Eastern Europe, were now running for their lives. Behind them rode something far worse than any army Europe had ever faced. The Mongols had not come west to conquer, they had come to hunt. Two generals led them, Subutai and Jebe. Veterans of 100 wars, men who had crossed deserts and mountains, annihilated empires, and never lost a campaign. They commanded barely 20,000 warriors, but they did not need more. They moved faster than anyone believed possible. They fought without supply lines. They lived off the land, the enemy, and each other. And most terrifying of all, they did not fight fair. Subutai understood something the rulers of Europe did not. Armies did not need to be destroyed. They needed to be tricked. Mongols would strike a town, then disappear. They would raid, then flee. They would pretend to lose, then run. And every time their enemies would chase them straight into the trap. When the Cumans reached the princes of Rus, they begged for help. If you do not fight them here, they warned, you will fight them in your own lands. The princes hesitated. The Cumans had been their enemies for generations. Now they wanted an alliance, but the stories were too terrible to ignore. So the Slavic world answered the call. From Kiev, from Galicia, from Chernihiv and Smolensk, princes gathered their armies. Thousands of armored knights, infantry with spears and axes, horsemen in chainmail. Together with the Cumans, they formed one of the largest armies Eastern Europe had ever assembled. They believed numbers would save them. They believed courage would save them. They believed God would save them. They did not know they were already walking into the grave. The Mongols knew everything. They knew the size of the army. They knew where it was marching, they knew who commanded it, and they knew exactly how to kill it. Subutai ordered his men to retreat, not in panic, not in disorder, but in perfect, deliberate fear. They let themselves be seen. They attacked small units, then vanished. They burned villages, then rode away. They wanted the princes to believe the Mongols were afraid, and it worked. For 9 days, the Slavic coalition chased them. 9 days across rivers, forests, and open plains. Every day the Mongols stayed just out of reach. Every night the princes grew more confident. Look how they run, they said, look how they flee from us. But they did not see what the Mongols were really doing. They were pulling the army apart. Some units marched ahead, others lagged behind. The Cumans raced forward, hungry for revenge. The great army stretched thin, and that was exactly what Subutai wanted. At last the Mongols stopped. They chose a place near a quiet river called Kalka, low hill. Wide plains, perfect killing ground. They turned to face their pursuers, and for the first time the Slavic princes saw the full Mongol army standing still. They believed they had finally cornered their enemy. They had no idea the trap had already closed. The Cumans attacked first. They charged without waiting for the Slavic infantry. They wanted blood. The Mongols did not resist. They turned and ran again. The Cumans followed, straight into hell. That was when the sky turned black. Arrows fell like rain. Horses screamed, men collapsed. The Mongols had circled behind them. The Cumans were being slaughtered, and as they broke and fled, they ran directly back into the advancing Slavic army. bringing panic with them. What happened next was not a battle, it was a massacre, and Europe was about to discover what true war looked like. The Cumans did not retreat, they collapsed. Their proud cavalry, once feared across the steppe, shattered like glass. Men screamed warnings that no one understood. Horses bolted in terror. Wounded warriors bled out in the dust, reaching for comrades who were already gone. They burst through the Slavic lines in blind panic, and panic is contagious. Princes shouted orders, captains tried to restore formation, but confusion spread faster than any command. The army that had marched in proud columns now stood tangled and broken. And that was the moment Subutai had been waiting for. The Mongols attacked, not in one wave, in many, from the hills, from the flanks. From behind, horn signals cut through the air, drums thundered. Thousands of horse archers surged forward, loosing arrows at full gallop. Their bows were not like those of Europe. They were stronger, deadlier, able to punch through armor at distances that should have been impossible. Men fell before they even saw their killers. Knights tried to charge, but the Mongols vanished. They pulled back just beyond reach, still firing. Every advance met a rain of death. Every retreat only brought more. The Slavic army had never faced an enemy like this. These warriors did not stand and trade blows. They did not fight for ground. They fought for exhaustion. They bled their enemies slowly, methodically, until fear did the rest. Horses were shot first. A knight without a horse was already dead. Arrows struck faces, throats, and gaps in armor. The wounded clogged the field. The living tripped over the dying, and still the Mongols kept moving, always circling, always tightening. Prince Mstislav of Kiev watched the disaster unfold. He ordered his men forward, desperate to stabilize the line. But there was no line anymore. The Cumans were gone. The vanguard was broken. The center was under attack from 3 directions. This was no battlefield. It was a slaughterhouse. The Mongols now unleashed their heavy cavalry. Armored riders surged through the chaos, cutting down those too slow to escape. Sabers flashed. Lances struck. Where the horse archers had weakened the enemy, the heavy cavalry finished them. Men were cut apart where they stood, and still the Mongols did not overcommit. They struck, withdrew, then struck again, like wolves tearing a wounded animal to pieces. The Slavic princes tried to rally, but every command was too late. Their army had marched for days without rest. Their horses were tired. Their men were hungry. The Mongols were fresh. They had chosen this moment. They had chosen this ground. And now they were harvesting. Entire units disappeared. 1,000 men here, 500 there, not retreating, dying. The river Kalka began to run red. Bodies piled at its banks as desperate soldiers tried to cross, only to be cut down or drowned beneath the weight of their armor. The Mongols did not chase. They let the river do the killing. Prince after prince fell. Warriors who had never lost a battle were now struck down like peasants. Armor meant nothing against arrows from every direction. Formation meant nothing when there was no enemy line. Bravery meant nothing when you could not reach your foe. By evening, the Slavic coalition no longer existed. What remained was a scattered mob of survivors fleeing in every direction. The Mongols pursued without mercy. They hunted them through forests and across open plains, for miles, for days. No one who fell behind was spared. Prince Mstislav of Kiev escaped the field, barely. With a small group of survivors, he reached a hill overlooking the river. There they built a makeshift camp of wagons and shields. They hoped to hold out. They hoped for mercy. The Mongols surrounded them and waited. For 3 days the Mongols did not attack. They watched. They starved the defenders. They let thirst and fear do their work. Then they sent an offer: surrender. The princes agreed. They laid down their weapons. They believed they would be spared. The Mongols had never promised that. They killed the soldiers, and for the princes they prepared something worse. They placed wooden boards over them. Then they sat on top, and as the Mongol generals feasted, the princes were slowly crushed to death beneath the weight. This was not cruelty, it was a message. This is what happens to those who resist. By the time the Mongols rode away from the Kalka River, tens of thousands lay dead. An entire army had been erased, and Europe had no idea what was coming. The battlefield was silent. Not peaceful, dead. The wind moved across the plains near the Kalka River, stirring torn banners and scattered arrows. Broken shields lay half buried in mud. Armor once polished and proud now lay twisted around bodies that would never rise again. The Mongols were gone. They had taken what they wanted: victory, terror, and a message written in blood. What remained was something worse than defeat: oblivion. Villagers came first. They walked slowly, cautiously, afraid the demons of the east might still be hiding in the tall grass. They searched for husbands, brothers, sons. They found corpses, thousands of them. Men stacked where they had fallen, horses rotting where arrows had struck them down, the riverbank lined with bodies, some still tangled together in their final attempts to escape. No one could count the dead, no one even tried. The princes of Rus had marched out with one of the largest armies their lands had ever known. They had come back with almost nothing. Entire noble families were gone. Veteran warriors who had defended their cities for decades now lay forgotten in the dirt, and no one knew how it had happened so fast. Survivors told stories that no one wanted to believe. They spoke of enemies who never stood still, of arrows that came from every direction, of charges that meant nothing and formations that dissolved like smoke. They spoke of a retreat that was not a retreat, of being lured, of being hunted. In the cities of Rus, bells rang for the dead, but the people did not understand what the bells were really warning them of. The Mongols had not come to conquer, they had come to test. The Kalka River had been a probe, a single strike to measure the strength of the West, and the West had failed. Subutai wrote reports. He noted how quickly the princes had taken the bait, how easily their alliance had fractured, how predictable their tactics had been. He sent this knowledge east. To a man named Genghis Khan, the greatest conqueror the world had ever known. Years passed. The people of Rus tried to forget. They rebuilt their armies. They trained new warriors. They told themselves the Mongols were gone. They were wrong. In 1237, the Mongols returned, not with 20,000, but with more than 100,000. They did not stop at the Kalka River. They burned Ryazan. They destroyed Vladimir. They crushed Moscow before it was even a city worth saving. And this time there was no coalition, there was no united army, there was only terror. The defeat at Kalka had not just killed men, it had killed hope. Princes no longer trusted one another. Alliances were broken, cities refused to send aid, so the Mongols took them one by one. Kiev fell. Once the greatest city in Eastern Europe, it was reduced to rubble. The streets ran red, churches were burned, and the bells that had once rung for the dead now rang for the end of an age. Mongols rode on, into Poland, into Hungary, into the heart of Europe. The world realized too late what the Kalka River had been. A warning. In the West, kings scrambled. They raised armies, they fortified cities, they prayed, but they were fighting ghosts, an enemy that did not fight like them, did not think like them, did not fear what they feared. The Mongols struck like a storm, at Legnica, at Mohyl, at countless towns that never made it into history books, and everywhere the same pattern. The same fake retreats, the same encirclements, the same annihilation. Europe survived, not because it won, but because the Mongol Empire broke apart. Genghis Khan died, his sons fought, his grandsons turned on each other, and the storm passed, but the memory did not. The Kalka River had shown what would happen when the old world met the new, when knights faced horse archers, when honor faced strategy, when bravery faced calculation. Even now, the dead still lie there, no monuments. No great markers, just earth, and beneath it, tens of thousands of forgotten warriors who never knew why they were dying. They thought they were chasing a retreating enemy. They were walking into history's bloodiest ambush. Long after the Mongol riders vanished beyond the eastern horizon, the land around the Kalka River refused to heal. The grass grew back, the river flowed as it always had, but the soil had been changed forever. It had drunk too much blood. Generations passed. Fathers told their sons about the day the sky rained arrows. Mothers whispered about riders who came like ghosts and left nothing behind. And still no one truly understood. Not until it was too late. The defeat at Kalka was not just a military disaster, it was a fracture in the world. Before that day, the princes of Rus believed themselves part of something strong, a network of cities and armies that together could face any threat. After Kalka, they no longer believed in anything. They built walls higher, they hoarded soldiers, they trusted no one, so when the Mongols returned, the land was already broken. The Golden Horde swept across the steppe like fire. Cities that had once traded with Constantinople and Baghdad were now burned villages with nothing but ash. Caravans stopped, roads emptied, the world shrank. Some tried to resist. They built fortresses, they dug moats, they swore oaths. The Mongols rode around them, starved them, waited. And when hunger had done its work, they walked in. The lesson of Kalka had been ignored. Unity was the only defense, and unity had died by the river. In Europe, chroniclers wrote about the Mongols in trembling ink. They called them Tartars, creatures from hell itself. They wrote of cities that vanished, of fields where nothing grew, of skulls stacked into towers. Some of it was exaggeration, much of it was not. The Mongols did not just kill, they erased. They destroyed so completely that nothing could rise again, and the first proof of that had been Kalka. Today, few remember the name of that river. It does not appear in most history books. No one builds monuments to defeat. But the Kalka was where the medieval world first glimpsed the future of war, a future of speed, of intelligence, of strategy, a future where courage alone was not enough. The princes who died beneath Mongol boards were not just killed, they were humiliated. Their deaths were a message to all rulers. Power means nothing without understanding. The Mongols understood everything. They knew terrain, they knew psychology, they knew when to fight and when to pretend to run. Their greatest weapon was not the bow, it was patience. At Kalka they waited 9 days, 9 days of pretending to be afraid, 9 days of pulling an army deeper into a trap, 9 days of watching their enemies make every possible mistake. Then in a single day they ended it all. The world learned. But it learned too late. The Kalka River still flows, birds still fly over it, but if you stand there long enough, the wind carries something strange, not voices, memories, of thousands who died without knowing why, of warriors who believed they were chasing victory and found only death. The bloodiest battle you've never heard of was not forgotten by chance. It was forgotten because it was too terrifying to remember. History remembers victories. Members' banners raised high, cities taken, and kings crowned in glory. It does not like to remember moments like Kalka, because Kalka was not a triumph, it was a revelation. The men who died there were not weak, they were not cowards. They were some of the best warriors Eastern Europe could offer: armored knights, hardened steppe fighters, veteran infantry who had survived dozens of wars. And it did not matter, they were fighting a future they could not yet see. Before Kalka, war was about strength. After Kalka, war became about knowledge. Who knew the terrain, who knew the enemy, who knew when to strike and when to pretend to flee. The Mongols mastered all of it, and for one terrible day beside a quiet river, the old world paid the price. The survivors carried that memory for the rest of their lives. Every time they heard hooves in the distance, they flinched. Every time an army retreated, they wondered if it was real. Kalka taught fear, a deep, permanent fear that never fully went away. Yet slowly time did what even the Mongols could not. It buried the dead. Grass grew where blood once pooled. Trees rose where armor had rusted. Villages were built where screams had filled the air, and the world moved on, but history did not forget. It just whispered, in old chronicles, in half-remembered songs, in the uneasy feeling that some defeats are so complete they erase themselves. The Battle of the Kalka River was not just the bloodiest battle you've never heard of. It was the moment Europe learned that the world was larger, more dangerous, and far less merciful than it had ever imagined. And somewhere beneath that quiet soil, tens of thousands still lie, warriors who chased a retreat and found eternity. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more forgotten battles, legendary last stands, and the moments that shaped our world. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. History is global, and so are we. And as always, the saga of battles never ends.